Hey, Paul, welcome to the Beyond Jaws podcast. Are you ready to talk about sharks?
Am I ever?
Well, we're really excited to have a really terrific and special guest today, Paul Cox. He's the Chief Executive Officer for the Shark Trust based in England. And Paul got his Bachelor's of Science degree in Marine Biology from the University of Plymouth. He did an MSc in Science Communication at the University of the West of England. And before his current position, he was the Director of Conservation and Communication for the National Marine Aquarium, which is also based in Plymouth. And Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
How'd you get interested in marine science and sharks, and how'd you get interested in this whole field?
I guess it goes back. The story goes way back to the 1990s, if anyone can remember those. And I used to work. Yeah, I had a previous career in banking, and I had no concept of what went on under the sea. But through kind of my early 20s, I started to develop an interest. I went on holiday, started watching TV documentaries and so on, and it just kind of, it just grabbed me. And so by the end of the 1990s, I just was ready to do something different. So I gave up my career in banking and went and studied marine biology. And the story just kind of goes on from there, really.
What was your first sort of entry point after you got your degree? Was it with was it with the National Aquarium, or did you have some other entry point?
Because I was a mature student by this point. I was 30 by the time I did my undergraduate. So I was very conscious of the fact that I was kind of competing with bright young things who, had all the education I had, but had 10 years, more youth on their side. So I figured whilst I was studying, I better get a foot on the ladder. Just as I happened to move to Plymouth, the National Marine Aquarium was in its infancy. And so I literally just went and banged on the window and said, what can I do? What do you want me to do? You don't have to pay me. I'll just come and work for you. And so I started off doing some work at the time, they were collecting data on sunfish, on mola sightings around the UK. And I started off kind of putting this database together using my kind of banking kind of background. And then I started to kind of look at what other jobs are being done around this place. And I was really taken with the idea of there's these guys, I think at the time they called them guides, who just, stood on the shop floor, as it were, and just talked to people about marine life. And I just thought, well, that looks like a pretty cool job. I can talk. So, so I got a job kind of working between my studies, just kind of communicating with people on the shop floor. And that just kind of really led me into this whole idea of communicating about marine life. It just kind of really grabbed me that whilst the academia was fascinating and I was learning a great deal, actually so many people were kind of, just needed that kind of spark to take them from ignorance in the correct sense of the word into kind of being engaged with marine life. So that's kind of started my love of both marine life and talking about marine life.
I'm surprised because you said you were a banker for so long, and then you moved to doing school in marine biology, which is great. But then you said you would work for free. I didn't think bankers worked for free. I'm just so surprised. Like I expected that from young budding scientists, but that's a surprise for me. Right. So what was your thought process there? Like how did that mindset change?
I guess I had the greed chip removed when I left banking. Yeah, I mean, no, seriously. I mean, it's a sense of like, if you want to, it really became obvious really quickly. If you want to get into this world, you've got to put your monetary desires to one side, and you've just got to do it for the passion of it. And then, hopefully you'll get paid employment somewhere down the line.
Did you have like a change in thought process because you had that finance background? When you saw projects, did you think of it in a different way? Like, oh, I wonder what the budgets are like for these. Because I mean, it obviously, and we'll get to it soon, but you're probably looking now more in your job now, focused more on like, what are the budgets? How do we get the spreadsheets. So did you find that background in banking helped you, in terms of throughout your career as a marine biologist?
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, I guess I never really left that that kind of way of thinking behind, and just the connection I had with kind of IT and spreadsheets and just budgeting and being able to kind of play tricks with money, I guess. But yeah, I guess that's always kind of been there, and that's part of why I've kind of gravitated towards I guess the finance end of it.
That's actually a good skill, because in the marine sciences, a lot of the scientists, they're the principal investigators are like horrible when it comes to money management, and they can never figure out how they get a grants for X number of years, and after the first year they're already spent all their money and they're broke. They still got another 2 years to go in the grant. So that's actually a good skill to have.
Yeah, being tight. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Well. Yeah. You're the sort of the den mom or whatever. The den dad's like, no, we can't go spend the money here. We need to have this for this other project or whatever. So it's actually not a bad skill to have, really, because you got to have somebody there that can put the reins on the spending. Otherwise, you're all out of the project. And I think it's a good example. It's just a good example of another skill you're able to bring to the field. And I'm sure, especially when you start off with the aquarium, it probably was helpful, as you said, to be able to put together different spreadsheets and everything.
I mean, aquariums definitely are very, they have to be very kind of business focused, right? They're big businesses and they turn over a lot of money and they employ a lot of staff, and they have some pretty big overheads. And so if you don't manage that properly, then, you're not going to last very long. So yeah, it is an important part of that.
Like the Monterey Bay Aquarium out here where I'm at, was started by David Packard of Hewlett Packard, and obviously a very astute business guy, and his daughter's been the executive director there since it started. And I know they manage it like a business essentially, which they keep it going. And so that's why I'm a bit aware of that. And I did want to say, when I was out visiting you a few years ago, I had a chance to go to the National Marine Aquarium here, and if anybody's in Plymouth, I really encourage you to go check out the aquarium. That's a really amazing aquarium they have.
Not many people happen to be out in Plymouth, but
I know. I just had to give it. And I have no connection to the aquarium other than I just had a really nice visit when I was there, and it was definitely a really neat place to see. If you happen to be in Plymouth for any reason, definitely go check it out. So you're at the aquarium there, working in their conservation communication section. How'd you get hooked up with the Shark Trust?
Good question. I mean, we kind of ran alongside the Shark Trust. I mean, actually, when the Shark Trust first came into being, when it was just a couple of people, they actually rented a space from the aquarium. There was it was like an ice cream parlor that wasn't very successful where it was as an ice cream parlor. So the Shark Trust took it on as an office, and so I'd kind of, I'd known about them for years and I'd seen what they're doing, and kind of as time went on, I got to know the other guys in the Shark Trust, and became more interested in what they were achieving by that point, into the kind of between sort of 2000 and 2010, they were achieving a great deal. And I just kind of thought, it's kind of more, it's really interesting because it's like I hope nobody from aquarium world is listening and going to take offense at what I'm saying, but in aquariums, you always believe you're doing great things for conservation, and you are connecting with people who, perhaps it's new to them, and you're opening their eyes to things, and particularly when you're working with kind of school kids and children and young people, you're really able to kind of light a spark. And so it does feel like you are doing something very, very worthwhile. But sometimes it's quite indirect. And often in aquarium world, you're kind of like, you've got all these great plans, all these great things you want to achieve. And then like a tank leaks, or like some pump blows, or, there's some disaster in the cafeteria. And so you're always kind of being distracted from the core conservation goals that you're trying to achieve. And so, the Shark Trust just struck me as being much more direct, really, without all of the that kind of overhead, without all of that stuff that you have to deal with aquarium world. So the opportunity came up to work with them, and I grabbed it.
Did the aquarium have much of a conservation program before you kind of started up, or kind of got the connection with the Shark Trust? Did they have much of a conservation program, or Because I know a lot of aquariums kind of eventually got into it, but it wasn't really an issue or a concern earlier on in a lot of the aquariums through their history.
Yeah. I guess there were. I mean, one of the key things I always believed, and I always was a big advocate for, was that one of the key things about the conservation outcomes aquariums can achieve is the learning and behaviour change that they can instill in the visitors, and actually not only in the people that visit you, but in the community in which you exist. Because aquariums, zoos, whatever, they're big institutions that actually garner quite a lot of trust from the local community. And so we did quite a lot of work on seafood, on sustainable seafood, on trying to kind of create a culture of sustainable seafood purchasing and eating within our city. And we had just before I left, we started up a seagrass restoration project, which is kind of still going and going great guns. We started up a scallop hatchery to try to do kind of scallop reintroduction, nursery for scallops. So we had a kind of few different angles around the conservation work that we did, but I was always really keen on the communication and behaviour change side of things, as much as the kind of more what we normally think of as conservation.
It's really interesting when you mention, looking at comparing sort of the work that and sort of the methods that Shark Trust uses compared to the aquarium. And I feel as though, the aquarium, a lot of times when you talk about conservation, the aquarium is the driver of the revenue that allows for that conservation to happen at the aquarium. And you just like when you mentioned your, the projects, the oyster bed and the sea gas project, you could make maybe an exhibit out of those. And so you're doing the education of the people, but you're also doing the reintroduction. You see a lot of aquariums doing the same thing. So sometimes research is done there, but it's also a display. Sometimes, there's sort of reproduction, sort of conservation going out there for endangered species. And so it's really interesting to see how that's done, but it's also the money that goes from the tickets sold for people to go into the aquarium. Part of that money, whatever the percentage might be, will go towards those conservation programs. And you need to have that revenue system in order to have that conservation, those conservation programs to exist, because it's just, like I said before, you could incorporate them into part of the aquarium, but having that revenue is a really, that's the main thing for the main driver for these conservation programs. Whereas the Shark Trust, a lot of times it'll be grants or it'll be donations for the work that you're already doing, the conservation that you're already doing. And I just think we're seeing that revenue system sort of come into play with, I find I'm seeing with a lot of people who are coming up within sort of conservation now, is you're trying to how can I get, because the money for conservation, as we mentioned, it's not, people are not coming into marine conservation for the monetary, acceleration. You're not getting the big bucks. You're not going to get a mansion and so forth, but you could have a side business or a business that helps you generate that revenue to support your personal lifestyle and still do conservation. But you have to be focused on that revenue system first and establish that. Hence, if a pipe bursts or leaks or something like that in an aquarium, you have to be focused on that first, and you have to have people for that. So it's a really interesting way of sort of dividing up how we get revenue from things for conservation. And so I guess my question to you is seeing you've been in both models. Is there one easier than the other? Is there one that you would, if you were to go back again, would you use the aquarium model or something similar to that? Or do you find the Shark Trust model still a tried and tested way of generating revenue?
Bit of both, actually. I mean, it's actually one of the things that we've been trying to do more at the Shark Trust is using those kind of models where you can hook into what we call unrestricted funding. So a lot of the time in conservation NGO world, it's grant, as you said, it's grant funding, which comes with restrictions, right? Which comes with here's a chunk of money that needs to be spent on this. These are the priorities. Here are the outcomes. Give us a report at the end. And if you don't do it, you don't get your final payment. And that is hugely important. That kind of income is hugely important to an organization like ours. And, we're always grateful to those institutions that are able to provide that support. But there is a certain sense of that doesn't give you complete freedom over how you spend your money and how you develop new projects and how you maybe start to kind of seed fund new ideas before they become fundable. So we've been with the Shark Trust, we've been doing a lot of work on trying to generate unrestricted funding, and that comes from personal donations and fundraising, people running marathons and so on and so forth. It also comes from relationships with businesses and corporates, comes from engaging with philanthropists and high net worth individuals who can afford to give, and kind of creating that balance of funding for the trust has been really important to how we're able to operate. And it does borrow a little bit from the kind of thinking that we had at the aquarium. And I'm sure we're not the only NGO that's working and thinking like that, but that definitely kind of is key to my thinking. The revenue thing is really important from an aquarium's point of view. But from one of the things I think the trust has done very well over the years in terms of engaging with aquariums is being able to use that relationship with the aquarium to generate voice, to generate support for campaigns. So,
Gotcha.
But that kind of having petitions, having the ability to be in and talk to aquarium visitors and put your case forward and get their support and the support of the institutions is really, a massively important part of that relationship. So, it is a bit about, there is the money thing, but there's also the voice thing, which is, voice is like really, for me, that's the most important thing. If we can get people to talk about what we're doing and to amplify what we're saying, then it's almost more important than money.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, absolutely.
A lot of it's in the engagement, like, because you want people, as you just said, you want people talking about it. So when you do outreach, education type stuff, you want to connect with people so the average person can understand what the concept you're trying to convey to the public. And I know, coming from the science research side of things, one of the things we've talked about in some of our other shows with some of the researchers, that what we're really horrible about is breaking things down so the average person understands. When you talk about seagrasses or something, sharks has a little bit of a built-in, like, it's sharks, but when you get into seagrasses, why should the average person know that? And I think that's where your marine science communication background is important. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's been a real eye opener. Well, it was. I mean, I did my my science communication back in 2006, and a lot of what I learned through that process was it was about, as you say, Dave, it's about audiences and knowing your audience and knowing how to address your audience in the correct way. So using I kind of think of it like code. If we're talking with scientists, we can use the scientific code, but if we're not talking to scientists and we use scientific code, then you might as well be talking in Dutch, because you're not making sense. So a lot of it is about kind of, there is no one communication that works for everyone. If you try and talk to everyone, you're talking to no one, kind of thing. And so we learned a lot about kind of how to break down audiences, different ways that you can kind of chop up, I guess, the world into different audiences. And then a whole bunch of stuff about kind of structuring your communication in such a way that you work with your audience to develop a message. You then test your message. You evaluate how effective that was at achieving your outcomes, and you go back in the circle and you do it again. And I think that's not necessary. And I think still, that was fairly new 20 years ago, but I think still not enough of us do that process of kind of talking and then hearing back what actually came out when I said that. What did you hear when I said that? And then cross-checking and changing your language or using different framing or different terminology to get your point across as clearly and succinctly as you possibly can.
I think one of the programs you have that really got my attention early on when I first became aware of the Shark Trust was your great egg case hunt, and how these sharks and skates that there's a number of species of sharks and skates that lay egg cases, and And the Shark Trust, you have a big egg case hunt for people to go out and just find these things. We're at the beach and try to identify them. That I thought was a terrific thing, being kind of a shark nerd. And thought that people rarely ever talk about egg cases. Can you talk? I mean, I think it's terrific, but can you talk a little bit about that whole program?
Yeah. I mean, actually, the egg case hunt is celebrating 20 years next year, so it's been around for 20 years now.
Ooh, nice.
So it started, I think, with just a chance find on the beach of one of the team who, oh, it's an egg case. That's from a shark or a ray or skate. And we should do more of this. And so the egg case hunt was born, and then it's just grown and grown and grown. And I think that I mean, we're now at the point we're just in the final testing of a new app, which will allow us to effectively roll it out globally, so that the app has identification for different regions around the world. And so people can, you can just go to the beach, kick around, find an egg case, take a photo of it, identify it, whack it up into the database. Just this week, we got our 350,000th egg case record. So, there's quite a few. And through the process of the Great Egg Case Hunt, we've gone from the point where, actually, I think at the beginning, there wasn't real certainty over this egg case belonged to this species and this egg case belonged to this species. Those identification skills didn't exist. So I think one of the early things that was done was kind of working on those identification and looking at keying out the different egg cases. And then we've done, the team have done work on kind of from that classification onto looking at distribution and where different egg cases are appearing on the beaches. We've got some people now looking at doing, I think it's stable isotope analysis, looking at scrapings from the egg cases and being able to then track that back into where the mothers are feeding, what the feeding grounds are of those egg cases. So there's all sorts of kind of little spin-offs that can come from it. And we just want more and more people to get involved, really. And it's kind of that it's got the ability to it reaches the geeks, right? So, there are a lot of people who go out all the time and find loads of egg cases. But there are also these chance, people just do it once, twice. Go, well, that's interesting. I've got this little story that that kind of demonstrates it. So we spend a lot of time talking about how there are, sharks are everywhere. They're not all those 5 species that we've all heard about and we see on the films. They're hugely diverse and they occur globally. And so particularly in the UK, this is kind of a bit of an uphill battle to encourage people. Yeah, of course there are sharks in our waters. And of course, yes, they're there. And sometimes you find yourself telling people this and they look at you with this, we believe you. Okay, whatever you say, mate. And then I was at this event one time in Brighton on the south coast of the UK. And this young lad, he's probably about 10 or something, I was saying, of course there are sharks and rays, and this is the egg case hunt, and you can go out on the beach and you can find these eggs. And he's what? They're from actual sharks and rays that live here. So, yeah. Just go down the beach. You can just find them. And he literally left where we were, which was opposite the beach. And he's like, I'm going off to find some. And he went off. And about 2 hours later, he came back with like a shopping bag full of egg cases.
Wow.
And his parents are like this.
look what you've created.
Like, we've got to put extra money on the parking for the car. But it just it's a very tangible way, a very real way of kind of demonstrating. You can say it as much as you like, but once someone picks up an egg case, you go, oh, right, okay, see, egg case. It's just a very effective way of getting that across.
The egg cases of these rays and skates and sharks, they're unique to each species. So if you find one, you can, if it's not in too bad a shape, you can determine the actual species there. So they're very unique. It's not like you see these egg cases, they could be to anything. They're very specific. So there's a really good purpose to finding these things, because you can tell like where these things may occur. There could be some nursery grounds where these egg cases are laid. So there's a lot of benefit to finding out where these egg cases are laid. Um, you mentioned you guys are setting up an app now. Are you how widespread is this program now? Is it just within the UK, or have you guys expanded beyond that?
No, it's expanding quite a bit. So there are sister projects in a couple of countries. There are great egg case hunt spin-off projects in like Portugal, the Netherlands. We're just starting to work with a group in Australia. We've had quite a few records from particularly the east coast of the US. I mean, we've had egg case records from Peru. They're kind of we've got a map that we just developed actually for Sharks International, which we may talk about later, where we've charted all the places in the world where we've got egg case records from. So what we want to do is kind of roll that out, and just see where they are, what species are popping up where. We've got, if you look at the UK, it's kind of gone in phases where it was that learning phase where we're just trying to see which species there were and how we identify the different species, through to now that I think we've got records from everything but about 500 yards of coastline all around the UK kind of thing. So we're just kind of, what we wanted to do is go through that process in different parts of the world, and just if there are data gaps, let's find out more about what there is where, and then get people collecting. Let's get up to 1 million eggs.
I have to admit, I did not realize there are that many egg cases available in certain places. I've been on beaches. I don't know if I've ever even looked out for an egg case. Now, do you find that when people start looking, they tend to find more when they know what to look for?
Yeah, you get a search image, don't you? Like an animal, you get a search image for something, and so once you've spotted what it tends to be, you can almost chart it. Like when people go on the beach, they'll find an hour and find nothing, and then there's one, and then there's another one, there's another one, and then like that kid, they end up with bags of them. It definitely you learn where to look and the strand line's really good, but because they're kind of similar color to washed up seaweeds and wracks and so on, so they kind of hide themselves pretty well. So you just have to poke around in the strand line, or way up at the back of the beach where the wind blows them way up the back. So once you get your eye in, you can find them.
Are the people, when they find them, they approach you with it? Are they able to help them ID them with this app that you developed?
As we go along, we're developing ID guides for different areas, so you can just you can quite simply break down between a skate and a shark, because sharks are narrow and skates are broader, and then you start to look at the horn shape, and they've got called an apron. They've got these horns, and then they've got an apron a bit between, and so you can start to kind of identify them based on these characteristics. So we develop these key and out guides, and then the app has those for wherever we have the knowledge. We build those guides in, and where we don't have the knowledge, you just take a photo and we work on it.
Tell us sort of the role of Shark Trust sort of in the shark science and shark conservation world. Obviously, we've got a little bit of a taste in terms of the egg case project, but why don't you give sort of like an overview for the audience?
I mean, yes, what you've got there with the egg case hunt is kind of one side of what we do. And I think that's what I like to think that's what makes us fairly unique, is that we do that public engagement. We do lots of education work. We pride ourselves on trying to make our website as engaging as possible and to appeal to people. So there's an educational part of what we do. But at the flip side of that is the policy work that we do, which is really about kind of, advocating for protection for sharks and rays wherever it's needed. And so there's the really serious policy end of stuff, which can be pretty difficult to it's quite difficult to communicate because it can be quite dry, but it's hugely important. And so there's that work through to the public engagement stuff and lots of stuff in between. So, for example, there's lots of work on fisheries. So obviously, sharks and rays are primarily under threat because of excessive fishing. And so the work that we do around fisheries, working either with domestic fisheries or with international fisheries, whether that be through through different mechanisms, we try to push for suitable levels of protection, fisheries catch limits. In the past, there's been a lot of work on finning regulations to ensure that sharks are when they are fished, they're returned to shore with fins attached, so they can be properly identified, so that we can then fisheries managers can start to build a case for sustainable catch limits. So that work, then there's the advocacy side of the fisheries work, but then there's also the engagement with the fishing industry to provide materials. So one of the big things that we do in Europe is produce these, what we call fisheries advisories. So essentially every year when the fisheries limits, the quotas and so on are announced, we'll provide easy to use guides for fishermen and fisheries enforcement officers, so that there can be no doubt about which sharks are prohibited and which ones can be caught, and those that can be caught, how they can be identified, and that kind of thing. So there's a whole bunch of kind of work along a scale, from the very serious working with governments to the not so serious working with school kids and everything in between.
The Shark Trust reaches outside just beyond the UK, right? You guys do quite a bit. You guys have more of a global reach now with your communication and everything in your project.
We talk about ourselves as global. I guess it's probably realistically, there's definitely a focus on Atlantic and Mediterranean, really, in the conservation work that we do. And we also try to engage with the US. We're working quite closely with US aquariums and zoos to develop a conservation program that, again, kind of can use all the benefits that aquariums and zoos bring to the game to get our message across. And so we've kind of, over the last sort of 5-6 years, really, we've been kind of expanding. But everything that we do is all partnership based. So it's not like the Shark Trust. There's not a Shark Trust office in every major city in the world. We just develop partnerships with like-minded organizations in different parts of the world, and work together to pool our resources, kind of thing.
Collaborations are going to be key in
Absolutely.
In this situation.
Yeah.
One thing I was reading, I wanted to ask you about, is I understand you read, one of the things that was a very changing part early in your career was that you read a book by Sylvia Earle, which had a big influence on you.
I did. Yes. Yeah, I think it's here. It's actually right next to me. Yeah, well, that's true. It's called Sea Change. And I think the bit it was when I mentioned when I was working in banking, and I was just kind of learning about this new world, and thinking, wow, that's fascinating. And I didn't realize there were so many issues being faced by the oceans, and this Sea Change kind of really set out very clearly the challenge that faced the oceans. And I think, I can't remember the exact words, but kind of in the final chapter, it was kind of, if you care about this, then you do something about it. So,
Right.
So what I did was give up my job and being extreme.
Talk about behavior change.
I'm not sure. I think I mean, it's probably a little bit, we all write our own story, don't we? We rewrite it, and I'm not sure exactly how it happened.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it was that straightforward. I read that and went, yes, that's it. I'm giving up my job. But it was an influence in the whole process. And then I've kind of, and actually I met Sylvia Earle earlier this year at a conference. I had my photo.
Did you tell the story?
Okay. I did tell a story. She went, "All right, yeah." I imagine
she's probably so used to it. She's probably inspired so many people, right?
Yeah.
She's like, "Oh yeah, another one."
Yeah.
She was very kind.
Yeah.
She was very kind about it. But I imagine she hears that quite a lot.
We're going to get to the Sharks International in just a minute, but what are some of the plans you have for the Shark Trust now going forward?
So we obviously 20th anniversary of the Great Egg Case Hunt. So next year we're going to be having a big focus on that. It's actually our 25th anniversary this year. So the Shark Trust is 25th
very nice.
this year.
Oh,
great. So we're kind of developing some new ideas for kind of the next 5-10 years. One of the things that we are just lining up, which I'm not really supposed to talk about, is we've had a campaign that we've
just
been
us.
Yeah, right. No one will be listening. It'll be fine. We've had a campaign called No Limits, which it came out the back of the we worked for a long time with a group called the Shark Alliance. Sorry, Shark Alliance, to push the European Union towards a strengthened finning ban. And so 2013, the EU adopted this new finning regulation, which included fins naturally attached, which matches the regulation in the US. And so there was a moment of kind of, right, what's next? And what came next after that was a campaign that we called No Limits, which was about identifying where sharks in particular were being fished without any catch limits. And so there's this kind of unmanaged, unregulated fishery. And so No Limits kind of has run from 2014 to now and has included a lot of work on blue sharks. So we achieved a catch limit on blue sharks in the North Atlantic, and there's still some work to do in the South Atlantic. And then for the last 4 or 5 years, there's been a huge effort on shortfin mako in the Atlantic, and then through this combined effort of a lot of global partners, we managed to get a retention ban at ICAT, which is the body that manages the North Atlantic of the Atlantic. And so No Limits has kind of had some very big successes, and we've learned a lot through the process of that campaign. And so our goal we will be in the next couple of months launching a new campaign that kind of comes off the back of No Limits, which is more ambitious, which is, more species, more ocean basins, more fisheries management organisations. I can't tell you what it's going to be called, can't tell you what it's all about, but that's what there's going to be a lot of work going into that campaign, which will hopefully really kind of elevate what we're doing and elevate the amount of support that we can get for the type of work that we do. It's real, as I mentioned earlier, the kind of fisheries management policy stuff is not always that appealing, but it's something that we've really got to throw all of our, throw everything at and try and make it something that people care about and want to support. So there's going to be a lot of work going into that.
And you mentioned earlier that you were talking about behavior change as something big that's part of the sort of the science communication aspect, is to try and get people to change their behaviors around sharks. And in one way, the egg case hunt can do that by just being more aware of what's around and what to look for and understand and probably get pretty excited and inspired when you find an egg case and see what's in it and so forth. How does Shark Trust evaluate behavior change, and what do you look for in behavior change for your sort of constituency, your audience?
Yeah, it's a good question, because when I was in my previous job, we did a lot of behavior change around, as I mentioned, we did some work with sustainable seafood in our local community, which was very, very measurable, very easy to kind of measure the number of restaurants, the number of conversations that were happening, the amount of seafood that was shifting in terms of the wholesale and so on. And we also did some work on plastics, which is a big deal, and climate change as well. And these things are kind of quite easy to they're very tangible for people. Yeah, okay, I have to turn my light off and I have to recycle my plastic and so on. And then when I moved to the Shark Trust, it was like, right, what are the behaviours that the everyday person can do with regard to shark conservation? It's not that easy. It's not that straightforward. So some of the behaviour change work that we do is as I mentioned with the fishing industry. So that's a very targeted audience, and so the work that the guys do on that kind of providing that information for the fishing industry, keeping up a positive relationship with the industry, being there to kind of support change. That's a very big part of the behaviour change work that we now do, and really important and is evaluated in terms of the shift in behaviours. In terms of behaviour change of the great unwashed masses, then that's been a little bit more difficult. And so actually this new campaign that we're doing is really focused on the behavior around using your voice for political change, using your voice to affect the way that policymakers are making decisions about fisheries or about sharks and rays. So that's the behaviour change that we're really going to be looking at in more depth in the next few years, as well as as you say, the kind of, learn more about sharks. One of our big things is move away from just the big five and just look at the diversity of sharks and rays and all that kind of thing. No, Dave, I'm singing to the choir here, aren't I?
Yeah, I was going to say you're one of the one of the things that got my attention with the Shark Trust was we're one of the few groups that really got away from the big charismatic species and we're actually looking for what I always call the lost sharks there, and including the flat sharks, which the rays and the skates, and the ghost sharks, which I think is terrific. And I think that's where really a lot of the action is going to be in the future, because you can only do so much with white sharks. They're really cool to see and impressive, but there's only so much you can do with it, and versus all these other 1,250 or so species of sharks and rays out there.
Yeah, and they dominate the way that people think about the word shark, and that's not always helpful. So it's more helpful, I think, for people to think shark and think of a whole diversity of animals, which includes tiny little ones and big ones and everything in between, and ones that barely ever move and ones that swim miles and miles and miles. And that kind of diversity has to be something that we have to keep plugging.
Now that we're talking about all these really wonderful different types of sharks, let's talk about just tell us about the Sharks International coming up here in a couple of weeks, actually. Just tell us a little about that.
Well, Sharks International is a moving feast, really, that was established, I think, 12 years ago, and has had a few iterations. Is that right? Was it 2010?
2010, the first one, yeah, in Cairns.
In Cairns, there was one in South Africa, there was one in Brazil, the last one in Brazil, and so the kind of the people behind Sharks International wanted it to go to Europe. The idea is to keep it moving, so that we can engage different people at different times. And so we, back in 2018, we kind of put our hands up and said, we'd love to get involved in Sharks International. And so we developed a partnership with some colleagues in Valencia. We thought Valencia would be a great place to hold it. Valencia is right on the Mediterranean coast. Mediterranean is it's a hotbed of shark diversity and a hotbed of shark threat. So we thought it'd be a great location to hold it. And so we, 2018 got the job. 2019 we thought, we don't need to do anything yet. And then 2020, right, let's start planning. And then
then a small little global pandemic.
What happened then?
Something happened, and it made it very difficult to travel to the location to meet our partners for a couple of years. So we pulled together the conference, and we've tried to make it as accessible as possible. Some people are able to travel to Europe. Europe's not always the cheapest place to travel to. It's not always the easiest place to travel to, and COVID is kind of coming and going in different countries. So we've created this event, which has got an online element and an in-person element to it. And the online element is for 5 days and has, I think we've got about 200 speakers, real diversity of topics in the online part, and then in the in-person in Valencia, it's been held at the Oceanographic, which is an aquarium in Valencia, and in that we've got about 100 speakers with some keynotes and so on. And one of the days is really going to be focused on the Mediterranean, to really kind of dig into the how the Mediterranean works and what lessons we can learn from the way that conservation is being managed in Mediterranean to other parts of the world. Where if you think about the Mediterranean, it's fascinating because it's got all these amazing species, and it's got, I don't know how many countries bordering the Mediterranean, different cultures, different languages, and so somehow you've got to create management that works across all of those cultures and languages and attitudes and so on. So I think the Mediterranean is a really interesting kind of melting pot and microcosm of how you can kind of approach some of the issues that we face. So yeah, we've got a whole day of Mediterranean work, and then 2 other days which look at topics as diverse as kind of movements, MPAs, behavior, genetics, human dimensions, communication, and advocacy. And it kind of tries to bring all those together. And the goal of it really is for us is how we can combine great science, effective advocacy, and really good communication for the betterment of shark conservation. So that's what we're hoping comes out of it. So yeah, it's been a journey.
I know you have 5 days of virtual talks, and then you have the in-person one. Are any of the for both? Are they going to be recorded? So because obviously, if you're not in that time, if you're on an awkward time zone, it can be really hard to watch some of these, hear them live. Will people be able to watch them at a more convenient time for them?
Yeah, so we try the online piece in particular. We've tried to kind of push the sessions to either end of the day so that we can get as many different time zones in as possible. But ultimately, well, Hawaii is a bit of an outlier. But everything that we're doing, we were very fortunate to get some funding support from Shark Conservation Fund, which enabled us to get this platform, which is fantastic and enables us to record everything. And it's all available for up to 12 months. So anyone that buys a ticket, either for an in-person ticket or a digital ticket, you've got 12 months to go back and rewatch and at your leisure all of these great talks and different perspectives. So yeah, hopefully it will engage a good number of people.
The thing I found really fascinating is we did a similar thing with a wedgefish, guitarfish symposium, but that was all virtual last year. Is that we were able to, because we had crazy time zones for people, but we were able to record them so people could catch them at different times. But I think the stuff that I've seen you're doing with the Sharks International, I think it's kind of some form of that's going to become a standard for how conferences are held in the future. Because I think it'll make them more international, more global, because a lot of people just can't come to the conferences, like whether it's Sharks International or other major conferences. And I think it's kind of exciting that you're trying some of these different things, even though some of it was probably forced upon you because of this little pandemic issue we had.
Yeah. Well, that's how we evolve, isn't it? When challenges are thrown at us. I think the biggest challenge that that we've got 2 weeks to really kind of nail this is to make sure that the online piece and the experience for people who are attending virtually is engaging and isn't just like watching Netflix of science talks. So that's I think that's a real challenge to get that right. I don't claim that we're going to get it absolutely perfect, but we're going to try. And hopefully, yeah, we will see more conferences evolving like this, because as much as anything else, it's a lot of plane flights for people to be moving around the world like that. And if we want to collaborate effectively, we can't always all meet in one place.
As those of us in the field know, conferences are not getting any cheaper. And when you have international flights to take, you have hotel costs, just even the conference registration is getting kind of cost prohibitive. Even like if I want to go to a conference in the United States, I have to really pay attention what the registration is, because I just a lot of times sorry, I can't go to every conference I might want to. And even some I want to, it's becoming prohibitive. But if you can have a virtual one that you can have for a fraction of the cost, or if you get a sponsorship, you can even allow society members or something to be able to engage. I think it's terrific. I really think that the societies that are hanging on to the current models, they're just going to die a slow death. I think this is what you're doing for Sharks International is the future. You're going to have to look at doing. I mean, there's nothing. It's great to be able to get together and have a beer with people. I think having that option will be more affordable, but you just can't get people from a lot of countries to be able to go.
Yeah. And we want to hear from as many different perspectives as we can, and as many different cultures and countries and geographies as we can. So this seemed to us to be the best way to try and do it.
And it opens up the line of communication to far more people, as well as opening up the lines for collaboration to far more people, down the road. If somebody can't make one of the online talks, they get a recording of it. They can connect with that person, if they're interested, and so forth. And I think that's that's a value that you just can't get from in person, to get as many people to come out to in person as, from different parts of the world, right?
Yeah, no, and I think, as you were saying, I think the recording part is really, I've been to a lot of conferences where, um, you kind of one session comes along and you go, oh, damn, I want to be there and there and there. And you go to one of them and you miss the other two. And then you leave the conference and you're all fired up and excited. And then you go back to work and there's like a million emails you've got to deal with. And then a week goes by and then 2 weeks go by and you come, what did happen at that conference? I can't really remember. And so that's what we really wanted to leave a bit of a legacy here for people to kind of remind themselves of the talks that they find inspiring, or the ones that they missed, and revisit them and keep it alive for a bit longer. Because you do spend a lot of money on conferences, and it can be quite a small period of time.
The other thing too on the website, and I don't want to get too off in the weeds for a lot of our listeners there, but it was kind of neat that the way you guys had the website set up, that you can connect with people. Like, you see somebody there, or you might want to connect. You can click on like, oh, let's connect. So again, some of the people and some people you might not know, but you might want to meet if you actually are able to. Like myself attending the conference, there's people I've corresponded with, but it'd be kind of neat to be able to actually meet them in person and stuff. So I think that was another innovation you guys had on as far as the website went.
And just putting a face to the name, right? I mean, there's little photos where you can just, I've heard this name, I've seen it in papers. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's a human, and they look like that, so I can then seek them out.
Especially for younger people, international people, but also for younger people, students, and just postgraduate students that are just starting out. They may not know who any of these people are, and they see their names, may read their papers, but they don't have any idea what they look like and stuff. And at least so if they get to the conference and they're like, oh yeah, that looks like so and so there. Because those of us been around for a while, we kind of know each other. We all know what we look like. But for younger people, I think it's a really good. It was a good innovation to include in the whole Sharks International.
I just hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, well, I'm planning to be there. That's for sure. Yeah, can you tell us? Do you how many people? How many people from how many different countries do you have right now off the top registered for that, whether virtual or in person?
I don't know. No, I don't know. One of my colleagues has been doing some maps actually to try and kind of show the diversity. And I off the top of my head, I'm not going to make it up, but it's it's impressive when you look. We've got a map of where all the speakers have come from and the institutions that speakers are associated with, and you've got a pretty good spread. And then delegates themselves, particularly online, I think it's almost everywhere. But we'll definitely check out the website. We'll be sharing that as widely as we can.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we'll put that website in the show notes so that people can take a look, click on it, and take a look and follow and register. If they choose to do so, I highly recommend that people do. I think even if it's just the online portion, I think you'll get a lot out of that online. 200 speakers. That's fantastic. It's a lot of information to digest. So I think that'll be really great.
Yeah. Will people after that say didn't register initially for the conference, after the conference, be able to if they want to catch talks, be able to still register or register or pay some nominal fee to be able to catch some talks?
I think we'll keep registration open until the conference end date, and then from that point on, that'll be it. So up until the 22nd of October, people will still be able to register and then access all that content.
I've been to the other three, and I'm going to be at this one. And they've all been just. If you're a shark nerd or if you love sharks, this is the conference for you to go to. And now you can do it virtually, which that will be. I'd really urge people to attend virtually. It'll be huge, and then catch the talks you can. It'll be a really good diverse group of people there. So that's terrific, Paul. We're excited to have you on to talk about the whole Sharks International conference coming up. I kind of close things up here, but I wanted to add, we always ask people towards the end is if you could talk to young students that are interested in pursuing a field in shark science or marine communication, do you have any advice for them?
I think always put yourself out there and, just be open to every conversation and just be open to every opportunity that you get. And as we said right at the beginning of this, we all need money to survive, but there's just don't put barriers up that are going to prevent you from doing things that are interesting and fun and can advance you. So give a bit and you'll get a lot back in return. I think that's probably the best I've got.
Very smart advice. I like it. You definitely, what we've learned from everybody that we've had on is everybody has a unique path, and yours certainly has been a unique path, and it's been a great one. And it's been, thank you for sharing that with us. It's been a pleasure to hear about it and to see, what you've been able to accomplish and to see what you've been able to help lead the Shark Trust in a great way. And looking forward to seeing more and more on the egg case hunt and so forth. And we'd love to have you back on to talk more about Shark Trust and the other programs that you have going on, especially some of the ones that you weren't able to fully go into today, but you'll be able to go into it once they're launched. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. We'd love to have you back on, and we want to thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for listening.